Welcome, dear listener, to another mesmerizing tale from the heart of Africa. Here, we bring you the stories passed down through generations, tales of wisdom, love, betrayal, and courage. Each story holds a lesson, each character a truth. So, sit back, relax, and let your imagination journey into the world of African folktales. Tonight, we travel to the heart of Igbo land, where a young maiden must choose between love and riches. This story, this is a story of the girl who followed her heart. As the seasons passed, word spread across the land that Okonkwo's daughters had reached the age of marriage. Suitors came from near and far, bringing gifts of kola nuts, palm wine, and bags of cowries, hoping to win the hearts of the two beautiful sisters. Among them were two men who stood out from the rest. One was Obinna, a humble but hard-working farmer whose heart belonged to Adana. Though he had no riches to boast of, his love for her was as deep as the great river Niger. He had grown up in the village and had always admired Adana from afar, enchanted by her kindness and grace. The other was Ezendu, a wealthy and powerful merchant who set his sights on Nneka. He arrived with his entourage, dressed in the finest garments, his fingers heavy with gold rings. His words were sweet like honey, and his promises even sweeter. He spoke of riches beyond imagination, a life of luxury in a grand mansion, far from the village. Okonkwo, being a man of great status, was pleased by Ezendu's offer. In his eyes, a man's wealth determined his worth, and he wished for his daughters to marry into prosperity. But fate does not always follow the path of men's desires, and the hearts of the sisters beat to different rhythms. The time had come for the sisters to make their choices. The village gathered in Okonkwo's house, eager to witness the fate of the two maidens. Drums echoed through the evening air, and the elders sat in a circle waiting to hear the decision that would shape the future of the young women. Nneka, with a radiant smile, stepped forward first. She turned to her father, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "Father, I have chosen Ezendu," she declared. "His wealth will bring honor to our family, and I shall live in comfort and splendor." The villagers clapped, and Okonkwo nodded in approval. To him, Nneka had made a wise decision. But all eyes then turned to Adana, who remained silent for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the horizon where the fields stretched far and wide. Then, with a calm voice but firm, Adana spoke. "Father, I have chosen Obinna. His love is true. With him I shall find happiness, not in gold or riches, but in a heart that cherishes me." A heavy silence fell over the crowd. Some whispered in shock, others took their heads, others shook their heads. Okonkwo's face darkened, his pride wounded by Adana's choice. "How can you choose a poor farmer over a man of wealth?" he asked, his voice laced with disappointment. But Adana did not waver. "Father," she said gently, "a man's wealth fades like the setting sun, but love, when true, shines forever." The decision had been made. One sister had chosen gold and the other love. And soon, the consequences of their choices would unfold in ways either of them had foreseen. With their choices made, the two sisters set out on different paths. Nneka left the village in a grand procession, carried in a richly adorned palanquin, her wrist heavy with golden bracelets. Behind her, Ezendu's servants followed, carrying chests filled with fine fabrics, cowries, and precious ornaments. Adana, on the other hand, walked beside Obinna, hand in hand, through the narrow footpath that led to his humble home. There was no grand celebration, no parade of wealth, only the quiet whisper of the wind and the soft glow of the setting sun. At first, Nneka's new life was everything she had dreamed of. She lived in a mansion built with the finest stones, her days filled with feasting, music, extravagant gifts. Servants attended to her every need, and she wore clothes finer than she had ever seen in the village. But beneath the riches, something was missing. Ezendu, though wealthy, was a man of great pride and cruelty. He saw Nneka not as a wife, but as a possession. He controlled her every move, detecting what she could do, where she could go, and how she should behave. The golden bracelet on her wrist felt like a chain, and the grand mansion began to feel like a prison. Meanwhile, in the village, Adana and Obinna walked side by side, toiling under the sun to build a life together. They had little, but they had love. Each morning, they went to the farm together, planting and harvesting yams. Each evening, they sat under the stars, sharing stories and laughter, their hearts light despite the hardship. As the year passed, fate began to reveal its truths. Wealth alone could not bring happiness, nor could poverty diminish the power of love. And soon, the sisters would come to understand the full weight of their choices. The years passed like a flowing river, carrying with them the fortunes and misfortunes of time. In Ezendu's grand mansion, Nneka's life, once filled with splendor, had turned into one of sorrow. Her husband, once charming and full of promises, had grown cold and ruthless. He spent his days traveling and his nights feasting with other traders, leaving Nneka alone in a house filled with riches but empty of love. One evening, as she sat in her chamber, a heavy sadness weighed on in her heart. What good is gold if my heart is empty? She whispered to herself. She had everything she had ever wanted: fine clothes, servants, and a grand home, but none of it could fill the loneliness in her soul. Far away in the village, Adana's life was different. Though she and Obinna had struggled in the early years, their love had remained strong. Together, they worked hard. Soon, their farm flourished. Their land yielded rich harvests, and they had become respected in the village, not for wealth, but for their kindness and unity. Their love had turned a simple home into a paradise. Then one fateful day, a messenger arrived from the city. He came bearing news that shook the village. Ezendu had fallen into ruin. His great misfortune had struck his trading business, and in his desperation, he had gambled away his fortune, his mansion, his wealth, everything he had once boasted of was gone. And with no riches left, his so-called friends and servants abandoned him, leaving Nneka to face her fate alone. With nowhere else to turn, Nneka set out on the long journey back to her father's village. Her heart, once filled with pride, was weighed down with regrets. She had chosen gold over love, but in the end, gold had turned to dust in her hands. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the land, Nneka finally arrived at her father's compound. But the home she had left with pride and arrogance now felt different. The people who once envied her now looked upon her with pity. Her father Okonkwo stood at the entrance, his once proud face now aged with disappointment. Father, she whispered, kneeling before him, her eyes filled with tears. I was blinded by wealth, and now I have nothing. I have returned with only my sorrow and regrets. Okonkwo sighed heavily. I gave you my blessings because I believed with wealth would bring you happiness. But now you see, my daughter, that true wealth is not measured in gold, but in the heart. Meanwhile, Adana and Obinna heard of Nneka's return. Without hesitation, Adana rushed to see her sister. For despite their differences, she still held love for her. She found Nneka sitting alone under the great Iroko tree, her once radiant face now marked with sorrow. Sister, Adana said softly, sitting beside her. We cannot undo the past, but we can learn from it. Come home, you are not alone. With time, Nneka slowly rebuilt her life in the village. She learned the value of humility, hard work, and true companionship. Though she had lost material riches, she gained something far greater, the love of family and the wisdom of experience. And as she watched Adana and Obina lived in joy, she finally understood love, not gold, was the true measure. And as so, the tale of two sisters became a lesson told for generations. A lesson that wealth may shine like the sun, but without love, it fades like a dying ember. For in the end, the heart that chooses love over gold finds a treasure that never fades. This concludes The Girl Who Followed Her Heart. Thank you for watching this beautiful tale. See you in our next story. Bye.